I leaned back in my leather chair, the soft silk of my blouse brushing against my skin as I exhaled slowly. From my office window, the city stretched out beneath me, steel towers gleaming in the afternoon sun, streets buzzing with people who had no idea that a quiet war had just been won. My war. The phone on my desk buzzed again. For the third time today, the same number flashed across the screen. I didn't need to answer to know who it was. I already knew.
It was them.
Funny, isn't it? The same people who once laughed at me, dismissed me, called me foolish for daring to think I could build something, now couldn't move forward without me. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. I traced my manicured fingertip along the rim of my coffee cup, the steam still rising gently. Their messages had grown more desperate, more pleading. Emily, we need to talk. Emily, please call us back. But I wasn't rushing. Not anymore. Because here I was, the supplier they once refused. The only supplier they could turn to now. And I wasn't about to let them forget it. The vibration of the phone stopped. Silence filled the room, heavy and almost sweet. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the satisfaction settle deep into me, before the memories came rushing back. The sting of rejection, the humiliation that once nearly broke me. That day still burned inside me. The day they refused my offer. I was 23 when it happened. Young enough to be underestimated, but old enough to know better than to put all my faith in people who never truly saw me. It was a humid summer afternoon in Ohio, the kind that made the air feel heavy and sticky against your skin. I remember sitting at the long oak dining table in my parents' house, my proposal neatly printed and stacked in front of me. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the pages, willing myself to stay calm. Across from me sat my father, Richard Carter, a man with eyes as sharp as the deals he made. Beside him, my brother Daniel leaned back in his chair with that smug half-smile he always wore, the one that told me he'd already decided I wasn't worth listening to. My mother, Catherine, tried to hide her unease, but she said nothing. She rarely did when it came to me. Emily, my father said, skimming through the first page of my proposal. This is cute, but it's not realistic.
Cute.
That single word sliced deeper than I could admit. I've done the research, I insisted, my voice catching but firm. Sustainable local suppliers are the future. If we partner now, we could get ahead before the market explodes. We could. Daniel cut me off with a laugh. You really think you can handle suppliers, negotiations, logistics?
Come on.
You've never run anything bigger than a bake sale. Heat rushed to my face, but I forced myself to keep going. All I'm asking is for you to invest. Just a chance to prove this works. My father placed the papers back on the table with a finality that shattered me. We're not wasting money on this fantasy.
Drop it, Emily.
Do something sensible with your life. My throat tightened, but I held my chin high. That's when I felt it, the cool touch of the small silver locket resting against my collarbone. It had been my grandmother's, passed down to me on my graduation day. Don't let anyone tell you your vision is too big, she had whispered. The ones who laugh at you today will need you tomorrow. I swallowed hard, clutching the locket under the table. Their laughter, their dismissal, it stung, it humiliated me. But it also ignited something. That was the moment I decided. If they wouldn't believe in me, I would build it myself. And one day, they would regret refusing my offer. Walking away from that dining table felt like walking away from everything I thought was safe. But in truth, it was the beginning of my real life. I packed my things into 2 suitcases and left Ohio for Chicago. My bank account had barely enough to cover 3 months' rent in a cramped studio apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but the space was mine. Mine to fail in, mine to dream in, mine to rebuild from scratch. Those early days were brutal. By day, I worked at a downtown coffee shop, serving lattes to people who seemed so sure of their place in the world. By night, I stayed hunched over my laptop at the tiny kitchen table, researching suppliers, negotiating contracts, cold calling anyone who would listen. Some nights, exhaustion would blur the words on the screen until I couldn't tell numbers from letters. My hands would ache from typing, my eyes raw from crying, but I never let myself stop. The first real break came 6 months in. A woman named Margaret Hayes, a seasoned business owner in the food industry, took my call. She didn't hang up after my pitch. She didn't laugh. Instead, she asked me to meet her the next morning. I'll never forget that meeting. I showed up in my only pressed blouse, praying the small coffee stain on the sleeve wasn't too obvious. Margaret was in her late 50s, elegant but approachable, with eyes that seemed to read every unspoken fear in me. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago," she said after listening carefully. "Passion in your voice, fear in your eyes, but a fire in your gut. I'll give you a shot, Emily. One contract. Don't make me regret it." That first contract was small, but it felt monumental. I poured myself into it, coordinating with farmers, handling deliveries, making sure every detail was flawless. When Margaret shook my hand weeks later and said, "Well done," I went home and cried into my pillow, not from sadness but from relief. Slowly, things began to shift. Word spread. One client became 3. 3 became 12. I learned to negotiate better, to hold my ground when suppliers tried to test me, to trust my instincts even when doubt clawed at me. Still, I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted modest updates, a picture of a cup of coffee, a random city sunset, never revealing the long nights behind the scenes or the deals I was starting to close. To my family, I was just managing to get by in Chicago. I let them believe I was struggling because part of me wanted them to. Let them think I was chasing a fantasy, while quietly, I was building an empire brick by brick. And then came the turning point, the day a major distributor reached out, asking if I could become their exclusive supplier. I stared at the email for nearly an hour, rereading it with trembling hands. It was happening. The dream they once called cute was becoming the backbone of an industry. And I hadn't told them a word. The day they walked into my office, I knew the tables had finally turned. I had been in back-to-back meetings when my assistant knocked softly on the door. "Emily," she whispered, "there's the family here to see you. They said it's urgent." My heart stuttered, though my face betrayed nothing. I smoothed the front of my navy silk blouse, adjusted the pearl studs in my ears, and told her to let them in. Moments later, the door opened, and in walked my father, my mother, and my brother. The sight of them together in my space, was almost surreal. They looked smaller somehow, not in stature but in certainty. My father's confident stride was dulled, Daniel's smirk nowhere to be found, and my mother's hands clutched her purse as though she needed it to anchor her. For a moment, silence stretched between us. They looked around, taking in the high ceilings, the modern art on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows with the city skyline blazing in the afternoon sun. My office was everything I had dreamed of, sleek, powerful, unapologetic. Daniel broke the silence first. "Emily, wow. This is impressive." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. My father cleared his throat. "We're here because we need your help." He paused, clearly struggling to say the words. "The supplier we depended on has collapsed. We've been left stranded. Someone mentioned you've built quite the network. We want to work with you." The irony was almost too rich to bear. I let the words hang in the air before I spoke, my tone measured, calm, but edged with a kind of authority they had never granted me before. "You refused my offer," I said quietly, my eyes fixed on my father's. "You told me my vision was a fantasy. And now you're here because that same vision is the only thing keeping you afloat." My mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes glistening as though she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Daniel looked down at the floor. "I'll be honest," I continued, leaning back in my chair. "It's hard not to remember every word, every laugh, every dismissal. Do you know how humiliating it felt to be called cute in that dining room? To be told to do something sensible, as if my ideas were a child's game." My father's jaw tightened. "Emily, No," I interrupted softly but firmly. "Don't explain. Just listen." I stood then, walking slowly around the desk, heels clicking against the polished wood floor. I let the silence stretch, let them feel the weight of every moment I had carried alone. This office, these contracts, this network, it wasn't handed to me. I built it. alone. While you doubted me, I worked until my hands shook, until I cried from exhaustion, until I had nothing left but stubbornness. And now, every major distributor you're desperate to reach, they work through me. Their faces were a study in shock, my father's pride crumbling into disbelief, Daniel's arrogance dissolving into shame, my mother's sorrow mingling with awe. Finally, I stopped in front of them. My voice softened, though it carried more power than it ever had in that house years ago. I am not the girl you dismissed anymore. I am your only supplier, and you will never forget that. Silence settled again, thick and unyielding. Outside, the city roared with life, but in that room, the only sound was the weight of truth landing where it had always belonged, on their shoulders. I let them sit with the truth for a long moment. My father avoided my gaze. Daniel tapped his foot nervously against the floor, and my mother twisted her hands together, her wedding ring glinting under the light. Finally, I spoke. My tone was calm, almost gentle, but there was no mistaking the firmness beneath it. If you want to work with me, there are conditions. And they aren't just business terms. They're personal. Daniel's head snapped up, his brows furrowed. Personal? Emily, this isn't. I cut him off. Don't. Not again. You had your chance to dismiss me. You won't interrupt me now. He sank back into his chair, silent. I folded my arms and began, steady and deliberate. First, respect. That word you laughed at, Dad? Cute? You'll never use that against me again. When I speak, you listen. When I negotiate, you treat me as the equal, or better, than any man you've ever sat across from. My father's face tightened, but he gave a small nod. Second, Daniel. You want access to my network? Fine. But you're going to work for it. No more shortcuts. No more coasting on family money. You'll shadow one of my project managers, you'll handle the grunt work, and you'll prove you can show up without arrogance. If you can't, you're out. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but one look from me silenced him. I turned to my mother last. And you, Mom, this one isn't about business. It's about voice. I watched you stay silent while they dismissed me. I love you, but it broke me to see you sit there and say nothing. My condition for you is simple. Speak up. If you see something unfair, if you feel something is wrong, say it. Not for me. For yourself. Her eyes welled with tears, and she whispered, I will. I promise. I leaned against the desk, crossing my arms. Third, transparency. Every deal we make together will be clean, accountable, and ethical. If I see even a hint of the old shortcuts, the shady tactics, the under-the-table nonsense, I walk. And when I walk, the doors close behind me. Permanently. The silence after that was thick, weighted with the gravity of my words. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter begging for approval. I was the woman setting the rules. Finally, my father spoke, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. Emily, you've grown into someone I hardly recognize. But I see now. You're right. We need you. And we'll do it your way. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but he muttered, Fine. I'll do it. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as she touched mine. I'm sorry, she whispered. For not protecting you then. For not speaking up. I'll do better now. I held her gaze, my throat tight with emotions I didn't want to release. This isn't about apologies, I said softly. It's about change. If you want me in your lives, if you want this partnership, you'll have to change. That's the price of working with me. The power had shifted. And this time, it wasn't moving back. The weeks that followed were strange, like watching the world rearrange itself into something I had never thought possible. Daniel showed up on time to meetings. For the first time in his life, he wasn't lounging in the back with folded arms and snide comments. Instead, he took notes, asked questions, even carried boxes when deliveries came in. I caught him once wiping sweat from his forehead after hauling crates, and for a flicker of a second, I almost saw humility in his eyes. My father, Richard, was slower to bend. He still carried the weight of his pride like armor. But during one negotiation, when a distributor tried to talk over me, my father stopped him mid-sentence and said, You'll direct your questions to Ms. Carter. The sound of it, Ms. Carter, rang in my chest like a victory bell. And my mother, she bloomed. She began speaking more, not just in business meetings but at family dinners too. One night, when Daniel interrupted me out of habit, my mother raised her voice, firm and steady. Let her finish. My heart nearly broke at the sound, but in the best way. I realized then that the conditions I'd laid down weren't just about business. They were about healing, about rewriting a family that had once written me off. Still, I didn't let myself forget the nights of struggle, the sting of rejection, the loneliness of building from nothing. I kept the silver locket close to me, my grandmother's words etched into my heart like scripture. The ones who laugh at you today will need you tomorrow. She had been right. One evening, long after everyone had left the office, I stood by the window with the city glowing beneath me. My reflection stared back, no longer the trembling girl at the dining table, but a woman forged in fire, sharpened by rejection, strengthened by her own hands. And I thought about the irony of it all. How their refusal had been the very thing that fueled me. How every laugh, every dismissal, every cute little insult had carved the path to this exact moment. Now the power was mine. The choice was mine. The supply was mine. I whispered it aloud, softly at first, then stronger, like a vow not just to myself, but to every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough. They refused my offer, and now I'm their only supplier. The words tasted like freedom,